Picture this. It's just a totally ordinary Tuesday morning. People are stuck in traffic on their way to work, kids are walking to school, commercial planes are cruising miles above us, the oceans are calm, the cities are buzzing. Everything feels perfectly, completely normal. And then, without a single warning, the rug is violently pulled out from under humanity. Gravity just disappears. We're not talking about an hour, not a minute, not even 10 seconds, just 5 seconds.
5 seconds. Honestly, you might be thinking, 5 seconds? I can hold my breath longer than that. But that is literally all it would take to completely rewrite the history of humanity forever. Because gravity isn't just this invisible force keeping your feet firmly on the sidewalk, it is the absolute invisible glue of our reality. Without it, Earth doesn't just turn into some fun, bouncy, weightless playground. It becomes a terrifyingly unrecognizable nightmare. Most people assume 5 seconds isn't nearly enough time to end the world as we know it. Well, in this explainer, we're going to see exactly why they are dead wrong.
Okay, let's dive into this, because before we can really grasp the sheer massive scale of this disaster, we have to lock down one fundamental question. What exactly is gravity? We literally experience it every single second of our lives, yet almost nobody truly thinks about what it's doing behind the scenes, holding the entire universe together.
Look, gravity isn't just the annoying reason your phone screen shatters when you drop it on the floor. It is the architect of the universe. It's the fundamental force that attracts objects with mass. It is exactly why planets even exist. It's why stars burn, and it's the only reason entire galaxies manage to hold themselves together. Without it, the universe as we know it would have never even formed. It has an absolutely flawless, uninterrupted 13.8 billion-year track record.
Think about that epic timeline. For 13.8 billion years, tiny particles floating through the void of space slowly began pulling toward each other because of gravity. That attraction built the stars, which forged heavier elements, which eventually clumped together to become planets. One of those lucky planets became Earth, and billions of years later, you and I are here, right now, only because gravity has never ever taken a day off. Until today. Let's imagine the absolute impossible. Exactly at 12 p.m. today, gravity vanishes. Everywhere at once.
12:00 p.m., second zero, the disappearance. There is no massive flash of light in the sky, no explosion, no earthquake, no warning siren going off. The world doesn't violently shake. Instead, the very first thing you would notice is silence. Not because the world actually stopped making noise, but because your brain wouldn't be able to immediately process what just happened.
In this very first fraction of a second, your brain, which has spent your entire life completely relying on gravity being there, would be entirely deceived. The coffee mug you just dropped wouldn't shatter, it would just hover. Dust would start floating upward into the air. Your body would suddenly lose every single sense of up and down. For a split second, people might actually laugh. You might think you were dreaming or like you were experiencing real magic. But then, the nightmare begins. Because gravity doesn't disappear alone. Everything moving on Earth suddenly wants to keep moving in exactly the direction it was already traveling. Think about the basic physics of driving a car. Normally, gravity presses each of your tires firmly against the asphalt. That downward pressure creates friction, and friction is the only thing that allows you to steer, brake, and actually control the vehicle. Without gravity, cars cruising at 70 miles per hour don't magically stop. The tires instantly lose grip, drivers slam on the brakes, but absolutely nothing happens. Vehicles instantly become 4,000-pound unguided missiles, becoming complete gliding death traps, sliding uncontrollably into buildings and each other.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the terror isn't just confined to the ground. Above the clouds, commercial airliners packed with hundreds of passengers suddenly face an impossible physics problem. Airplanes fly using lift, right? But lift only works when gravity is pulling the aircraft downward to balance it out. Without gravity, lift loses its counterweight entirely. Autopilots instantly disconnect as flight computers are suddenly fed completely impossible data. The fundamental rules of aviation just collapse in real time, and sheer panic spreads through every single cockpit on Earth.
12:01 p.m., second one. Total chaos. What started as a fraction of a second of weird confusion rapidly, violently accelerates into simultaneous global terror. Everything that isn't physically bolted to the ground begins drifting. Pens, books, kitchen knives. But it's not just the loose objects. The invisible systems we completely take for granted are failing everywhere, all at once.
Inside your home, the familiar flow of air just stops because warm air no longer rises and cold air no longer sinks. Elevators instantly stop functioning correctly. Office workers start drifting towards ceilings, and floating heavy equipment crashes into glass windows, shattering them outward. And in hospitals, it is so much worse. Patients literally lift off operating tables. Syringes, scalpels, heavy heart monitors, they all become weightless. Doctors are suddenly fighting impossible conditions as cascading structural failures turn every single room into a deadly hazard zone.
So the crucial point is the most terrifying biological impact happens inside your own body. Your heart is still beating, sure, but your blood is no longer being gently pulled towards your feet by gravity. Instantly, fluids rush and redistribute straight toward your chest and your head. Your face feels completely swollen. Intense pressure builds up right behind your eyes and your vision blurs. But worse than all of that is your inner ear. The tiny, delicate organs that constantly tell your brain which way is down lose their reference. Suddenly, up and down do not exist, triggering this overwhelming, paralyzing, nauseating disorientation.
0. While all of humanity is panicking, scientists around the world are finally looking at their data. Seismographs detect nothing. Weather satellites detect nothing. Yet every single gravity sensor on the entire planet suddenly reports the exact same impossible number, 0. Phones start ringing off the hook at research centers, but there isn't a single computer simulation in the world that predicted this. There's no emergency protocol, because absolutely nobody believed gravity could just vanish. 12:02 p.m. Second 2. Earth responds. If the first second was utter confusion, the second becomes a desperate, violent fight for survival. Any hope that this is just some weird momentary glitch completely disappears, because now the momentum of the planet itself starts aggressively fighting back against this lack of gravity. Cities like New York transform into lethal obstacle courses. Heavy televisions crash and shatter, and without gravity, those razor-sharp glass shards don't just fall to the floor. They become high-speed flying projectiles. Kitchen knives, metal tools, office supplies all turn airborne. Outside, massive construction cranes carrying tons of steel completely lose control. Every single unbolted object in the world suddenly becomes a high-speed, deadly threat. There is quite literally nowhere to hide. And out across the globe, something enormous and terrifying is beginning in the oceans. You see, water is incredibly heavy. Just 1 cubic meter weighs 1,000 kilograms. That's a literal ton. Because Earth's atmosphere is still temporarily holding it in, the oceans don't instantly vaporize into space. Instead, possessing this massive, unstoppable inertia, billions of tons of water begin rising. Gigantic, impossible swells start forming across every single ocean basin. The sea itself appears to breathe upward, threatening every coastline on Earth with a disaster no tsunami warning system could ever possibly predict. Now, let's step away from the Hollywood speculation for a moment and look at the real, cold, hard physics of what is happening above our atmosphere. What about the thousands of satellites orbiting our planet right now? Well, the reality is dictated by exactly how this gravity failure actually occurs. And this brilliantly illustrates the nuance of the physics here. The fate of these satellites depends entirely on the mechanics of the disappearance. If gravity truly disappeared only down here at Earth's surface, but the planet's overall gravitational field remained unchanged out in space, those satellites would actually be largely unaffected. They'd just keep orbiting. However, if Earth's entire gravitational field vanished everywhere, all at once, those satellites would immediately leave their orbits and just continue traveling in straight lines right out into deep space due to their own inertia. But honestly, either way, the people down on Earth have far, far more immediate problems. Because right down here, as we cross that 2-second mark, we have to pull our attention upward toward the sky. The atmosphere itself is starting to break. The very air around the planet, no longer anchored down by gravity, begins behaving in ways no human being has ever experienced. The invisible, life-giving shield that gives us the air we breathe is violently shifting. The absolute panic, the floating cities, the rising oceans, the planes falling out of the sky, all of that was just the beginning. What happens next will make the first 2 seconds seem almost harmless. We have barely even scratched the surface of this disaster. If the sudden loss of friction and the impossible rise of the oceans in just the first 2 seconds completely broke the world, what in the world happens to the atmosphere, the Earth's crust, and humanity itself in seconds 3, 4, and 5? Gravity is the quiet, perfect architect of our entire reality, and when it finally clocks out, the universe reclaims absolutely everything. So what do you think would happen next?